is, I forgot what episode number this is, but welcome to Keep Calm and Build On. I'm joined here today with Mr. Daniel Kelleher from Civic. They have a decentralized identity solution on Solana. Super excited to chat with you, Daniel. How's your day so far?
That's good. It's coming close to an end now. With settling in for the evening. Yeah, it's really great to be here, Andy. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Are you here in Europe or are you stateside?
I'm in Berlin. Yeah.
Berlin. Fantastic. Yeah, I'm in Serbia right now. Our team is headquartered out of here, and we were just jamming about big before the show here. It was real nice to be able to connect with the whole team. Kind of like yourselves, we did an offsite afterwards to plan and think about how's this year been, what have we done well, what can we learn from, and what are we excited for in 2023. And well, that's kind of also the point of this show. So I'm looking forward to learning more about your project and really finding out from a builder's perspective where your head is at. So I guess I want to start off with something completely off topic, which would be more so on whenever you got into Web3. What was it that got you? What was it that made you interested to take the time to learn it and then actually work in Web3?
Yeah, it was smart contract blockchains like Solana. It was at the time that it was Ethereum was the only game in town, or essentially, and it was that. So I obviously looked at Bitcoin, played around with it. The idea of a blockchain as a decentralized data store was interesting, but like a lot of people, kind of like, what's the use case? Like, but then the idea of a decentralized Turing complete consensus layer and then you kind of understand the implications of that when it comes to being able to build trustless applications. And you start reading the Vitalik's writings and talking about supply chain and talking about eventually identity, and then really I think that's what led me to really understand Web3. We didn't call it Web3 back in those days.
That's so weird to think about. Wow, because I'm a 2021 class person, so not calling it Web3.
I'm a child. 2021. Yeah, Web3.js was the library that you used to access the Ethereum as an Ethereum client. So it was a thing, but it wasn't really a concept beyond that.
No one identified as Web3.
It was hard to. I think this will come up quite a lot when we talk. It was really Bitcoin was the big game in town, and it was transaction, it was financial. And the ideas of moving beyond that, Vitalik had written about them. Some people were thinking about them, but it wasn't in the zeitgeist at that point.
So was there aggression, skepticism? I mean, what was the overall response like when the world is Bitcoin, the world of crypto is Bitcoin, and then there's this guy talking about smart contracts and stable coins and all this crazy nonsense?
So I was a little bit before, I was a little bit after Ethereum. By the time I started 2017, 2018, Ethereum was fairly well established. But I do remember looking at message boards, and there was strong resistance to the idea of Ethereum. There was, and there often is, tribalism, and there was the sense that if you have more than one chain, then you're diluting the purities to some extent. It seems crazy now in such a multi-chain world, but I definitely saw that people were just downvoting people who liked Ethereum just because they liked Ethereum. The new kid.
So it's 2017, 2018. So did you go through the full cycle previously, bear, bull, back to bear, or were you when did you kind of enter the industry?
Yeah, very much in a bull. And the first bear market that came in 2018 was hard. It was shook me to the core. And because I had I had this naive impression that as a builder that prices were in any way related to the quality of stuff that you build. And that took me a year and a half to realize was nonsense. It's so related to other market pressures. We've seen it in this year, especially. The quality of the tech has almost no correlation, I think, to the prices, which is encouraging in some ways.
Yeah, the market's inefficient right now. It's part of where the opportunity is. I wonder then, man, out of all the smart contracts, and what led you to be interested in Solana, especially at that time period? I can't imagine there was as much noise about it.
No, the Solana didn't exist then. It was a twinkle in Anatoly's eye, I think. And our founders are very close to Anatoly and his people, and we got the inside track a little bit at Civic. We were able to see Solana grow. We did some work with them back in 2019, even. And then, like the technical genius of Anatoly and his team, but also the skill set that he brought, and specifically in relation to decentral or distributed systems, telecoms, literally talking about latency at the packet level, and bundling a transaction up into UDP packets and so on, was something that it made sense. As we've been thinking about blockchains as being like serially processing a small number of transactions, and everything else just stays in the mempool forever. And Solana were talking about, no, all the transactions are going to be processed now, and in 400 milliseconds there's going to be another few thousand transactions. Was very inspiring. But it was like with a lot of people, I think it was you had to, like, the first time you hear about things like proof of history, you kind of have to just kind of go, okay, sounds cool. I'm not qualified enough to know whether it's legit or not, but it's proven itself, and we'll get onto why we as Civic kind of moved a lot of our architecture over to Solana, I guess, soon. But we started off working on Bitcoin, and we had a smart contract protocol on Ethereum, and we built since late 2020, early 2021. The kind of core of our functionality of our systems has been on Solana.
Man, so the transition phase there must have been pretty nuts. I can only imagine what that looked like. Before I go into a bit more on Civic, and I'd love to hear more about that, I've heard so many people talk about Anatoly, especially in the earlier days. For myself, I can understand the technical side. I'm a student developer at the moment, so I can read code, but I'm not going to bang out any kind of optimization on my own. I say that, though, because I'd love to hear from someone who's, it sounds like you got to watch this from very, very early on. Could you describe in like a simple way for other non-technical folks that might be hearing people talking about, yeah, Anatoly is really smart, but like, what is it from a technical standpoint that makes so many intelligent people respect him?
I mean, you don't want to have this cult of personality as well, right? It can cut both ways, and there's something that makes people like Anatoly and Vitalik different from. I'm actually not going to name the other side of that coin, but I think everyone knows those sort of people you're thinking of, right? I think it's a certain humble quality mixed with an assurance about the quality of their ideas, maybe. That even aside from having to be technically convinced by what they say, that sort of like having a cohesive a concept in their heads that makes sense. I guess there's an answer for everything, and there's also, I guess, an understanding of weaknesses in the argument as well, and not hiding behind it or not trying to downplay them. Like Solana is a work in progress, just as other successful chains are a work in progress. When you hear Vitalik talk, I know we've spoken about him a lot already. He has a roadmap that is years, if not decades out.
Decades.
And we're at the start of that roadmap, and it's the same. I think that's a good sign, right? It's not use this system. It's finished. It's brilliant, but rather this is a sort of a long process. When it comes to the technical side, like the things I mentioned, the fact that it's focused on low latency, high throughput, and it's been borne out by the sort of scale that we've seen, especially about 12 months ago, is
it's shocking to see how it's held up.
Yeah, I wouldn't advise, like, certain people are inspiring, but that inspiring quality can often be misleading as well, and it's important to always go and look at seeing if there's actually meat behind what they're saying, and if there's actually borne out in real life.
It begs the question in this industry, especially when we talk about identity. So it'd be fascinating to hear your perspective. We get to be able to judge each other. On Twitter, we can see our messages, our responses. On Facebook, we can see the general kind of pictures we post, or Instagram, something similar. What do you think reputation looks like as we move forward? Because right now, someone doesn't have a lot of followers on Insta, not that big of a deal. But I always kind of get this creeping concern where, what if we end up living in a life that someone may not have access just because they don't have 10,000 followers and something, and their voice can't be heard? Do you see these kind of dystopian things, or do you see another side perhaps that makes you a little bit different?
No, I mean, that's I guess so. Reputation, I think, first of all, the idea of reputation, everyone has this kind of idea in their heads, like, how do you trust especially if you're just looking at people's public keys, right? People are generally anonymous. How do you trust one person's opinion over another person's opinion? This is why it's good that you asked that question about what is it about Anatoly that makes intelligent people trust him. Is there a number one could put against his public key? Like, is there a score? Is there a number of upvotes that could we translate that quality into a score? Probably not. Reputation is really built upon a base layer of identity. It's almost like level 2. Once you've got level 1, like having a decentralized identity platform, or a Web3 identity platform, you could also describe it, in place, then solving reputation for me is like the next step. And it's definitely not going to be simple. I think there are more ways of getting it wrong than there are getting it right. You see the exact thing that you were talking about everyone having effectively like an Instagram followers score, and people who don't have a high enough score, their voices are not heard, is something that people have, like science fiction writers have written about. It's on Black Mirror. There's an example of that. And it's actually, to be honest, it is the way we're kind of sleepwalking into it if we're not too careful. So I think it really needs people to think really deeply and pragmatically about it. Shout out to Lighthouse DAO. They're a Solana organization that are working on exactly these projects. They're working on a solution with Grape DAO. And that's great. That's a great partnership, because Grape DAO are very pragmatic and good at getting things tried and tested, and they're seeing what sort of models work in real life and which ones don't. Something nuanced, something qualitative rather than quantitative, I think, is the solution. Something localized rather than global, I think, is part of the solution. So you have.
I wish we could generalize it, like kindness and compassion. Not sound like too much like Lex Friedman, but it inspires me, because it's like it's pretty easy to incentivize for division. It's pretty easy to incentivize for hatred. And I look at a world where everything is permissionless. I have to believe there's a way that we can incentivize kindness and compassion in mind.
Yeah, well, you're speaking my language. I like the idea in general, like maybe in a more concrete form of using the power of Web3, the power to effectively encode our values in smart contracts, and you choose which smart contracts you trade with. For example, like a good example is Orca, right? Orca have a climate fund, so that every time you're trading with trading through Orca, a part of that trading fee is going to a climate fund. And so that's the only AMM I use, because that encompasses my values, even if another different AMM might be a basis point or two cheaper. So this is a little bit aside from the subject of reputation, but it is an example of you decide which values you consider important. So if you've kind of slight movement into the idea of identity, if you can expose aspects of your identity, expose aspects of your history, your personal history, working with various organizations and groups, you put that out there, then ideally other people can choose which of those components they consider important in establishing your reputation. And that takes a lot of that takes a lot of kind of legwork to set up something like that. So I'm not expecting everyone to have to like fill in lots of checkboxes all the time, but you can imagine groups, communities like DAOs would start to have their own weighting around those things. So they'll say, okay, well, we trust people that have had this amount of contribution in these DAOs. They've received letters of commendation or the equivalent in tokens from these groups, and the sort of a web of trust starts to develop around Web3, even across chain. Maybe the solution is something like that.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Well, I'm glad. I'm always inspired to hear people like yourself talk about these subjects. I spend most of my time in the token vesting solutions side. So when we think about security, it's going to be more so in a standpoint of if a community says they have X number of tokens that are being vested in a certain time period, you want to know they're not going to, print twice as much of it and take a loan out of it and run off to the Bahamas. Nah, no one's specific. But no, the idea is that there's supposed to be in transparency on the blockchain. We're supposed to be able to confirm things and verify, and that's part of the promise. And it makes it to where online, I guess not online, but in Web3 right now, it's almost. Well, I was talking to a gentleman at Breakpoint, security expert, and he was talking about how it's almost an incentive to do bad things because you don't get caught, you get away with it. You do get caught, you go the white hat route, and you still get everything that you need. And so he was explaining that it's like it's a tough incentive model right now because it's just so small that there's not a lot we can really change. And I guess when I think about decentralized identities, at first I was actually a bit against it because I like the whole purely private type scenario. But as I've spent more time in Web3, I got to say, I think it would be nice if there was something that could at least validate, hey, I'm something of a human. I can tell you're something of a human. We can interact, and for the bots that want to do their own stuff, they can have their own environment. So I would love to hear, what do you see in a world where the same way that only teenagers are ever on Facebook and then the whole world is on there, let's just imagine Web3 has something similar. People decide they want to share value to each other using some kind of Web3 tech. What does that look like in the way that we begin to interact with each other and protect, I guess, not just our reputations, but to make sure that we can align incentives for having this good reputation? I don't know the way it would be. But yeah, I'd love to hear, where do you guys see things going?
We probably will end up at reputation again, just to address some of the questions, the points that you had there, relating to being able to trust somebody. But let's talk about the base layer for a second. So I think, first of all, everyone will have at least one decentralized identifier. So what is a decentralized identifier? It's like any other identifiers, email address, a Twitter handle, or something like that, in that you can have many of them, but it's unlike those in that it is not given to you by some authority. It's something that you provision to yourself, self-sovereign.
Okay.
As part of that, usually, and in its most powerful form, it's associated with a private key that you hold. So in my utopia, everyone will have private key material, which is, for us crypto people, non-controversial, but outside of this small group, it's actually very rare, even very
weird technical to think about. But yeah, it's much bigger outside of the small group too.
This is why I really like the idea of the Saga phone, by the way. Not just having, because obviously all mobile phones have keys in them, but most mobile phones don't have keys in them that let you actually use them to prove your identity and sign messages and sign transactions. They have keys that let Apple do certain things or let Google do certain things or whatever, but not let you do certain things. So in my mind, everyone will have some key material. They will then have decentralized identifiers that are derived from that key material, so you can prove that the person is who they say they are. They will not be limited to just those keys. So these decentralized identifiers, and this is the model that we're building on, by the way, allow for multiple keys, multiple devices, key recovery, social recovery, key rotation, all the things that make it easier for everybody to use Web3, rather than just people who know how to look after private keys. Can
you unpack social recovery for a moment?
Yeah. So this is just one example, right, of recovery methods. But we have watch this space, because we have a plan, and we actually have prototypes already in place for DAO-based social recovery on
Oh,
Realms,
that's interesting.
on Solana. So
Really?
let me kind
Is
of
this
show you.
some alpha we're hearing here?
Yeah, it's gonna be early 2023, hopefully. So the idea is, and I think it's good to talk about it, because if enough people are interested in it, then we will do it faster. If not as many people are interested, we'll do it slower. But the pieces are already in place. So if we don't do it, somebody else will. So you have a decentralized identifier, and that's the owner of all your identity information. So any information that is associated with you is not associated with your public key. It's associated with this decentralized identifier. You can kind of think of this as like an abstraction layer above your public key. So you can have multiple public keys, and they're all associated with that single.
So if I break that down real quick, like just normal non-Web3 person, kind of like Google authentication, you do OAuth, you slap your email that you're comfortable with, you get inside, no password was memorized, but you just clicked a button from the user side of things. Would it be similar like that?
Except it's similar in that it's a proxy to your actual identity, and that you don't have to provide your password or like login. You don't have to have multiple logins for multiple services. You have one login, and that gives you access to multiple services. So in that respect, it's
one
similar.
login that makes me tickle just thinking about it. I can't imagine.
But it's important that you don't you're not providing any information to the likes of Google by proving ownership of this identifier. So you can really think of it as the difference between you don't have one wallet, right? You might have multiple wallets, and any one of those wallets will allow you to gain access to the same.
That is really neat. Okay, I see how that works.
So if you have that, right, so you can have that already gives you key recovery, right? So you account recovery, I should say. So you have, let's say, you have your main hot wallet key associated with that identifier, and you have a cold wallet key, maybe a paper wallet, and you keep that's a totally different set of private key, and you keep that safe, and you hide that in a box, and you never use it. But if you lose your hot wallet, you can go dig it out, and you can use it to add a new hot wallet to the account. And this is not just important for financials, right? Lots of people have built things. There's things like Gnosis Safe on Ethereum, which is a similar thing. But with identity, it's quite important, right? You change wallets. You don't want to have to start from scratch with building up your reputation and building up your trust relationships with DAOs that you work with communities that you're involved in, and so on. You don't have to go through KYC with every other this, that, and the other exchange again just to be able to gain access to your funds. This is the decentralized version of the I've forgotten my password, click here, go through all the steps, what's your mother's maiden name, all that sort of thing. So that's out of the box with decentralized identifiers, you could say. Where social recovery comes in, or any other kind of recovery, is you add a third key, or you add another key to your decentralized identifier, and that key isn't held by you. That's not in a box in your house. That might not even be a private key at all, actually. So in the one that we're toying with, this is a key that is owned by a DAO. It's a PDA in Solana speak. It's effectively you could also have any kind of multi-sig using this. The important point is that key has the power to add new keys to your decentralized identifier. So now let's say you have 2 or 3 of your most trusted friends and family, and you put them together in a DAO. They don't with Realms, for example. This is super easy. They don't actually need to know too much. But I'm assuming this is all part of the whole. One day everyone will have a private key. So there's a lot of work to go before social recovery is common. But it's the way I think the kind of future is. Oh, by the way, Apple are doing something similar for their they've announced something similar, social recovery, right, just this week. Okay, so you have that key. Now you've lost your hot wallet, whatever, or it's been stolen, or it's been compromised. Somebody's found a bug in the wallet, or something like that. You call up your trusted friends and family and say, hey, please vote on this proposal to remove my old key and add my new one. That's how it works.
That's interesting. And so Apple's already talking about this. This is pure reckless speculation, but I'd love to hear your thoughts as a builder. What's the likelihood we see an Apple crypto wallet publicly and availably? They're not hiding it. They're not. It's like it's fully out there. What timeline do you think we might see that?
I don't know. I don't hear much. I might not have my ear close enough to the ground, but I don't hear many rumblings in that direction from Apple right now. So I would say the likelihood is low. I think they're going more on the approach of like, stop buying NFTs through.
You want to own the entire internet,
Yeah.
every single transaction that ever occurs in anything digital.
Exactly, and they see, because they've got quite a strong
market.
hold of the market. They don't have to ask for a piece of the pie. They're happy to just lock the pie in a box and not let anyone get it.
Yeah, it's hard to think at that scale when it's like consuming entire industries doesn't satiate the appetite, but
it's easy to remain principled, and we can say we're doing the right thing and keeping everything decentralized. But I mean, I have a lot of respect for Apple in other regards, like the focus they've put, especially in recent years, on security and privacy in the App Store. I think is commendable. They've done a good job there.
Well, I know I'm inspired by the tech, the UX. That was a big part of what personally got me really excited about Solana. Was just consistently I saw excellent user experiences, and I noticed when going through Civic, I was surprised. I don't know how to say is how much energy there was in your brand. I come from a background of marketing, so I spent a lot of time building websites and assessing UIs, and I was curious because you especially put a good bit of attention on your mission. And before going into the techie bits of what you guys do, and I'd love to hear about that transition, but I'd like to hear more about this world that you're dreaming of, this world that you're building. I know that digital identities, they sound very simple in concept, and I used to think that's all there was to it. But I'd like to see if you could just take some time and walk us through what does that big picture look like on what on why a digital identity is not the same as a standard identity, and what kind of stuff this could lead to.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so first off, I can take absolutely zero of the credit for the power of the brand. We have an excellent design team, an excellent marketing team, awesome. And it really has. They've really done some excellent work there with the branding and the website. This is about a year or so ago, we had a very different kind of outlook, and we're kind of focusing on B2B. And I think it was also influenced, and the website and the branding also reflected that. So it was a lot more, lock and key, everything's safe with us, which is all true. But it was definitely, now we're focusing a lot more on, I guess you'd say the empowering, fun nature of decentralized identity and the power that brings. And and you mentioned as well the UX on Solana. That's a very core part of why we moved our foundation to Solana, and why we think that a cross-chain identity solution still makes sense to be kind of anchored on Solana, because what we're aiming to do is, and you hear a lot of people in Web3 talk about this, deliver a sort of a Web 2 experience on Web3, deliver the same sort of user experience, but in a more kind of powerful way, a more empowering way, a more self-custodial, self-sovereign way. So what that means concretely is that you can have a Web3 profile. People can go and see that on Civic Me already. This is you. This is the way you represent yourself to the outside world. You can collect, for example, tokens, NFTs from all sorts of chains, and you can choose which ones to present on your front page, which ones to hide, which ones to burn and get rid of, and so on, to kind of really curate your own personal identity. But it's all backed by this self-sovereign identity layer, and then you add credentials to that. We haven't talked about verifiable credentials, but that's a very important part. These are aspects of your real life identity that are then stored in a data store that you own, and they're encrypted with keys that you hold. so that then you can start to share those with specific people as well. So you always are in full control of your identity, of your information, but you're interacting with Civic Me in the same way as you might interact with a Web 2 social media site, and that you're presenting a version of yourself. And as always, you can have more than one version of yourself. You can have more than one key. You can have more than one identity, and that's all in itself already very empowering.
That's interesting. So, like, whenever we think, I'm just going to pick a random niche within Web3. Well, let's start off with gaming. What are some things that is either very difficult or not possible right now that using in this world of mass adoption of decentralized identities, what would be normal or possible in that age?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, your accounts in these games would again, people aren't used to having to start from scratch when it comes to their progress in games, the things that they've collected, and so on. Just but if they lose the key, so already decentralized identity and the power of decentralized identifiers brings value there. Cross-chain features, if you have a game that is on multiple chains, or maybe a game migrates from one chain to another because it becomes more because it's faster or better user experience. Someone might move to Solana, for example. If you have an identity built up on a game on chain 1, it will be cool if you were able to keep that identity when it moved to chain 2. So that's also a lot of like game Web3 games, they do that already by effectively hiding the key from the user, right? The user doesn't actually have the key, that sort of thing. But also the community building aspect. So in any games that are multiplayer, as you have an in-game identity, wouldn't it be cool if aspects of your out-of-game identity could be mirrored in-game and vice versa? So interactions that you took part in game, you completed a quest with a particular guild or a particular group that you were in, were represented as an NFT, and then you could show that NFT on your Civic Me profile, and you could port it around and show it in DAOs and so on, because it's all connected under the same identity. But just off the top of my head, I'm sure people who've thought about gaming a lot more could think of some more examples.
What I can think of is almost like so I spent most of my life in like the Facebook, Instagram, YouTube world, mostly on the PPC advertising side. And it's like I felt comfortable. I knew the community, I knew the leaders, and then I hop over into Twitter, and I realized there's a whole other different world here. And it was fascinating to see like people with so much power and influence in one place have very little in another. I wonder if decentralized identities helps to unify that to where a person's brand isn't so as reliant on one platform. At this point, I really can't even see a world without that because I remember arguing Facebook versus MySpace in high school. So like it's been my entire life.
100%. Well, first of all, even the very trivial, simple case of on one platform, you've built up a follower group, you've built up a network, people that you follow, how to reliably translate that over from one platform to another. I mean, this is the dream of Web3, right? Where you're building these kind of interoperable modules. You don't have to be locked into one particular social network or platform. You move your trust group from one to another. Verifiable credentials and reputation come into that again, as like the core components that would make that work.
Now, there's something that I know is on the minds of most builders I talk with, and that's mass adoption. And I'd love to hear, how do you and your team, when you're thinking about this vision, you're thinking about the future you can build towards, what do you guys, can you kind of walk me through the process that you guys take when you're thinking about, okay, we know we want to get over there. We know there's some things we have to figure out before then. Kind of walk me through as a team. How do you guys decide, okay, this is what we're focusing on this quarter. This year we'd like to do this in order to go there. What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, use cases really are an important one. That's why we've put a lot of focus in the last year on Civic Me into NFTs, because it's these days it's people's first entry point into into Web3. So you want to be able to, if somebody mints you an NFT because you went to a concert or because you bought a specific brand of sneakers or something, it's already quite impressive, I think, or illuminating if you go onto a platform like Civic Me and that appears there. So building a lot of those kind of on-ramps sort of into the system. But then the second part of it is the one of the important things we're trying to do is make people's Web3 experience more secure and more fun to use. And I think one of the blockers of that is this kind of dependency and addiction we have to wallets and public keys as like the main identifier. So for people to hear so if I, again, going back, if I lose my key, then I have to start from scratch. There's nobody I can call to get my account re-enabled and so on. Again, a lot of platforms that are focusing on providing like digital collectibles to consumers are not provisioning users with keys directly, or they're not expecting users to provision keys. They're hiding all that, and you still log in with a Web2 login. But bridging those gaps, I think, is a really important part of onboarding the next billion Web3 users. Finding a way to get that security and safety into a decentralized and trustless world. And identity.
Yeah, it makes me think about, like, with all the hacks and scams and shameless rugs going on, it sounds like one of those situations where you're seeing the problems that are happening. Maybe not so many folks are talking about, like that Web 2 layer where a person doesn't actually own that assets they think they do. It is nice to hear there's people like yourself working on that, because, to be frank, I knew that there was some sketchiness in the NFTs on where it's actually stored at, but I didn't think about it from the perspective of something like a ticketing service or one of those Web 2, one of those ramps that's bringing Web 2 people, and that could be their first experience with crypto. If their first experience, they thought they had something they don't. Wow, yeah, it could be damaging.
What the current solution to all that is effectively to infantilize people and to say, well, we don't trust you with custody of your assets. We don't trust you with ownership of your identity. We're gonna deal with that for you. Just trust us. We'll deal with that for you. You'll be kind of, all the data, everything you do, we'll see it, and theoretically we can, and sometimes not so theoretically, especially in Twitter cases, we can censor what you do and so on. But other than those details, we've got you covered. And the empowering nature of Web3 comes in again. You don't need to infantilize people to offer them security, and there's also this abstraction layer again. So we have there's our sister company Identity.com. We work very closely with them on all the base layer protocol stuff. And one of the base layer protocol things we've built is called Cryptid, and this is a kind of imagine it as a wallet on top of your identity. But this wallet you can add constraints to. So let's say we're talking about like a rug or somebody stealing from your wallet by making you sign a transaction that you shouldn't have signed. These sorts of Cryptid and similar wallet abstractions can add on-chain constraints that stop that from happening. So you can add spending limits to your wallet. You can add timers to your delays to your wallet. So there's a delay between issuing.
I haven't. That's really cool.
That you can have all sorts of constraints added to your wallet, and you can pick and choose what they are. You can either have a bespoke out-of-the-box set, or you can configure them. And this is another example. It's still a little way to go before it's as user-friendly as a bank account. Where you can call up your bank and have a chargeback on a credit card. But if there's to be a Web3 version of a chargeback on a credit card and that sort of thing, then this is what it's going to look like.
This is pretty close, though, because the ability to be able to lock something, and you have to take some other arbitrary action in order to unlock it, whether it's a timer or whatever. That alone could mitigate so much risk. It's almost like in a restaurant or a nightclub or something when they have a safe. Sometimes it's time locked. It takes once they start the process, it's going to take 30 minutes to an hour, and you have a short window to take care of your business.
Exactly. Here's another example. We have a vault system that we're building right now into Civic.me, and it's based on this cryptid technology. So if you have valuable NFTs, I'm sure some people still do, then you can choose to vault them. And what that means is it still shows up in your profile. It's still associated with you. Nobody's taking custody. But if you want to unvault, if you want to take it back in order to sell it or something like that, you have two choices. You sign that unvaulting with your cold wallet, your ledger or something like that, or you do a face scan. And if the face scan matches your face that you've registered, then it will unvault.
That is so cool.
So imagine, let's say there's like a Bored Ape party, right? Something like that. You have to present ownership of this NFT at the door, but you kind of need to have it on your phone, right? You need to have it available to you on your wallet, but you don't want to be like holding your phone, which has like several $1,000 NFT around. So it's vaulted. Yeah. You have to actually scan your face in order to kind of prove ownership of it. But that's just one possibility.
I had no idea that even exists, man. This is the point of this podcast, is because even as someone that's studying the industry every day for months, I learn new stuff, new features, new solutions every single day.
That's a rabbit hole of possibilities. Like once you kind of build up a few of these Lego bricks, they start to stack on top of each other, and they really start to become powerful. And it is super important to make sure that we fill all the gaps onto onboarding, to make sure that these sort of things are available to people, because frankly, the current Web3 crypto people are pretty good at managing keys and so on. But we want to get their grandmothers to use the system.
Yeah, Granny and Babushka, they're not going to have a great time managing multiple private keys and keeping them safe in different places.
Yeah, can we have people like that join the community without requiring them to take steps, but without having them being infantilized by having it hidden behind a wall of custodianship? Like how can we have people use DeFi instead of CeFi, for example?
Well, it's one of those things, and I wonder on the when you're looking as a builder, and I kind of want to take it back, speak a little bit to in the community, it's specifically seeing folks that they're figuring out where do they dedicate their time. You've got Ethereum, kind of the OG for smart contracts. Polkadot Cosmos interoperability is pretty interesting. Aptos Sui, hey, there's interesting stuff really there, really interesting technology. So I guess, of course, there's no one advice for anybody. So I'd like to know with yourself, what is it that made you guys decide not only to use Solana, but to actually move over to Solana as opposed to other options?
Quickly, the advice I'd have for people starting out is try a little bit of everything. It really helps to give you a good broad understanding of the space. But then go with what's proven. Go with what's actually showing. Don't go with promises of TPS and so on. Go with the heavy hitters, and I think that's what led us to Solana in part. We were really hit by the huge spikes during the bull run in 2019 and on Solana, on Ethereum, in terms of costs. We were building a platform that wasn't about yield farming. It wasn't about DeFi. It wasn't about making huge amounts of money, right?
In the wrong environment, in the wrong time then.
Yeah, it was about building something that people already have, but in a more secure, safer way, in a more self-sovereign way. And to go from zero cost, or at least zero financial cost interactions in the Web2 world, where you're paying with your attention and your time and your sanity, to going to high cost and high latency interactions on Ethereum. And we just didn't have the same model at all. Like anything you see right now, Civic Me, all of that stuff, everything I was talking about social recovery, about cryptid and so on, sure, it would work, but nobody would use it because it'd be too slow and expensive. Right? Even now, even with all the L2s, the user experience is not the same. So we were looking for a layer that would be our home, that would be everything you did would feel at least as good as a Web2 experience. Now we're going to be taking that experience and mapping it out to other chains, because we don't think that, as we said at the start, we don't think that everyone has to use Solana in order to get the benefits of self-sovereign identity.
Yeah.
But it needs a place to live, and that place to live, we think, is Solana's the best choice for that.
And for you guys, was it speed? Was it parallel processing? Was it cost? Like, what was the main contributing factor for that?
I mean, those three are all one and the same in many regards. Identity has a benefit over some other use cases in that typically, and I don't want to go too much into the technical details of Solana, but Solana's parallel processing is the most powerful when everyone's accessing different accounts, right? So I've got my identity, I'm updating that. You've got yours. Where it struggles, and I use the word struggles very lightly because it still, even when it's struggling, does well, but it struggles more when everyone's accessing the same account at the same time, right? So if there's an NFT drop, everyone's updating the same accounts at the same time and getting locks on them. When there's, a DeFi markets will have a small number of very liquid markets, but the cool thing about identity is that naturally spread. So it seems crazy then to use a chain that doesn't benefit from that parallelization.
Yeah. That's interesting, man. Well, it's what I wonder then is I'd like to hear that story where you guys transitioned from Ethereum, especially going from DeFi summer, decide to move the entire. It's okay if you get a little bit technical. We can unwind stuff, but I'd like to hear as if we're boots on the ground.
Right.
Walk me through that.
We were watching, so we have a wallet. If you go to the App Store, you'd actually find a very differently styled Civic wallet, which was a lot of the things that we're talking about in terms of account recovery and identity-based, like face scan for security, but not in the same sort of decentralized composable way as the way it's being built on Solana right now. We came to that model through we came to the Solana version of that through building up a totally different suite of products, because at that point in 2019 we were and I guess it ran into 2020 as well, we were thinking, okay, we've built a lot of stuff, but just the economics don't work out. They don't make sense. And we were looking at Solana, but we were also not in that point. It hadn't released on mainnet, or it was about to release on mainnet. Prepared to kind of en masse rewrite everything over. So we were looking for other avenues. We were looking for new extensions to our business that we could maybe focus on if they went well. And we hit upon a model called Civic Pass, which I haven't talked about yet, but it's another core part of our offering, which is essentially a kind of a permission layer. It's soulbound token based. It's very close.
Okay, I remember reading about the soulbound side of things.
Yeah, sure. So think about soulbound tokens as NFTs that are represented. You can't move them away from your wallet or your identity. So in some way they represent some aspect of you, right? And so now there are lots of issues with soulbound tokens, I have to say. That's another thing that sometimes people do very wrongly, because they, by default, in the kind of naive implementation, they expose a lot of information about they're kind of public by default. So what we have is a model which has the credentials, the information, the private information that we collect about you. If you go through identity verification process, our KYC process, which is another wing of what we build, that private information is kept by you and stored secretly. But aspects of that can be represented on chain by a token, and that token may contain no information on it other than the fact that you're over 18, for example.
So you can confirm, deny, over 18, over 21,
right.
Citizen of a certain country or not. I guess that'd be tougher.
We're even careful about citizen of a certain country or not. We will have allowed to trade on this DEX or not, sort of thing.
Oh, I see.
Unique person or not, that sort of thing. And that ends up, because that's all that a smart contract needs, right? A smart contract isn't going to be, and I mean a program in Solana, but the same thing, isn't going to be looking and storing your private information. there might be a company behind the smart contract or behind the DeFi protocol or whatever that may need that information for regulatory purposes, especially in the future. That's definitely a possibility. But the smart contract just needs a switch. It just needs okay or not, and and that turns out to be quite powerful. So we've built this Civic Pass is based on, again, something that we worked on with identity.com, called the Gateway Protocol, which is like a decentralized, extensible, permissionless way of building that sort of permission system, again, identity based. So that really was, again, something that we wouldn't really dream of building on Ethereum, because issuing a token of that type would just already add a huge amount of cost, and especially in the use cases like NFT mints that we're using it for, or DAO voting, where the cost really has to be worth it for people to use. Wasn't going to happen on Ethereum, and we did a few prototypes and played around with some stuff on Solana, and it went over really well, and we got people integrating it, and then we started building up our experience on Solana and our knowledge, and we realized that you could build decentralized identifiers on Solana. So most decentralized identifiers actually aren't on blockchains these days. They're on less they're on less suitable substrates, but they really are powerful when they're built on blockchains. So
it can be fully permissionless. I mean, if there's not
exactly, you have the consensus layer for free. So we worked with Solana Labs. John Cinque from Solana Labs worked with me on building the first version of decentralized identifiers, and that is like the basis for everything else we built. And now we're building up on in a much more kind of composable, standards based, and frankly more efficient way a lot of the infrastructure that we had before, but because it's built out of Lego bricks, like I was saying, there's a lot more that you can do, a lot of different ways you can put them together. But it really started, it wasn't that we sat there and went, right, we're going to take this thing and we're going to en masse dollop it onto a new chain. We had to really reinvent our business in a lot of ways.
Man, it's powerful to hear that even during that reinvention process, Solana's what you chose, because it's one of those things. I guess when I look at a decision I make, I don't know if I'm just super negative or just trying to fight my biases, but I always look for, how am I wrong? What am I missing? What biases do I have? And if I don't think I have any, then the question is, which ones do I have? Because they're definitely there. So I guess I asked that because it's always cool to hear what people's process is. What's interesting about yours is the way that you guys had already built something on Solana, and after building it, as you dove deeper, you kept going. One of those questions to ask myself is, how deep is this rabbit hole? Because everyone's journey is a little bit different. Some people, they have someone that kind of pushes them into Web3 or crypto, or just whatever aspect that might be interesting for them. For me, it was months of research. Like, I just ate so many videos, articles. I was on Reddit and started learning Twitter just to get into this. And it was easily months before I could feel myself not identifying per se, but like that I could wrap my mind around what was happening and decide, okay, I find this favorable, I find this unfavorable, and feeling confident, at least a level of confidence in the decisions.
Yeah,
I guess it's cool to hear that it's the activity that you did, because that's one of those things about Solana that I've got to say really blew my mind. The hacker houses, the breakpoint, making it to where I've seen so much collaboration between the community members in our ecosystem. And when I compare that to other places that I've been, other environments or the circles, it's just not anywhere near the same energy. One of the things I like about this space is people are pretty open. People are pretty direct. We share what's going on. If there's a challenge or something, like, hey, here's where we messed up. Here's where we thought it would work, and it totally didn't. I wonder, one of those tough things that I know many projects are still working with. Streamflow Labs, we do token vesting is probably our main offer, of course, including multi-sig and payroll. But with doing so much token vesting, it's been 35 partners at this point, publicly announced. We've gotten to see some of the ebbs and flows, how projects used to do token launches, how they're doing it now. You've seen since 2019 DeFi summer, you saw 2021 pump, you've seen 2022 crash come down. As a team, and you guys have thought about matters of coming up with a token, supporting the community, adding real use case value. There's a lot to think about. would you kind of walk through what those conversations look like and how you guys make decisions on important matters that leads to decentralization and permissionless technology? Like, how do you handle these sticky situations like a token where it matters so much for such a long period of time when you make these choices?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions in there. I just want to just really briefly go back, like when one of the things you mentioned earlier was the rabbit hole and how long it took, how much research it took for you for everything to stick. I have to say I feel particularly lucky and blessed in that regard. I got a lot of personal help and support from members of the Solana Labs team, people like John Sincre, people like Jordan Sexton, people like Anatoly himself. They came on and they answered our questions, and they really helped us through. It was a time when when the documentation wasn't even what
I
it
can
is
only
now.
imagine what it must look like back then.
It was a glass chewing experience, but if you have somebody there, you know, helping at least put a bit of honey on the glass as you chew it down, it helps a lot. So I really appreciate that. The question about I think you were asking about how do you kind of, well, I'm going to synthesize the question into this anyway, like how do you kind of remain on message and on point when there's kind of whirlwinds around.
You got multiple incentives that need to be aligned. Where there's one side, of course, the community wants a token that's going to go to the moon immediately. But as a protocol designer, you know that there has to be utility. There has to be value.
That's a very good, important point. And when it comes to identity, that's a very important point. So a lot of people have this sense that identity is a really vital part of Web3, but not as many people have a clear idea of what that means concretely. And not just that, but how do you actually bring the community with you? How do you bring immediate value to other protocols, to other communities, to people onboarding into the space? How do you bring value to those people while also building an ecosystem, an architecture that will last? Because identity is one of those things that it's a big step up. You have to you need kind of everybody to accept that it's required and then use the same standards around the same time for it to become valuable.
That sounds like quite an undertaking, especially.
Yeah, so for me personally, that was a huge challenge. And I think one thing that I didn't do at the start or even in the middle that I'm doing more now is engaging with community. And I'm mainly talking about things you're talking about, hacker houses. It was really Solana that taught me that. You can't just, there's this naive feeling that you can just have a clear idea of what you want to build, spend a long time building it, heads down, then click the make public button on GitHub, and somehow magically they will come and people will use it. And that's obviously wrong. And the Web3 is all about collaboration from the very start. It's about collaboration all the time. You can't build in a vacuum. You also can't be too swayed by, Discord channels and people giving their their opinions on how best to make a token moon and so on. You have to have that vision, but then you have to find out how to bring people with you along the way, how to bring immediate value to other communities, to other projects, other protocols, and so that collaboration ends up bringing rising all ships, as they say.
Absolutely. And so this is something that I found builders, we're not usually thinking about these things. It's we're focused on building a solution at first, making sure that thing works and is not going to get rugged, and then it's kind of like, okay, well, there's a whole economic side to it as well. And it's one of those challenges that keeps me up at night, because it's like, it's yes, the software that can make some of these things easier, but we could be here all night if you wanted to list out the token flops that have occurred, where it's not about just a price, it's about a project that's not thinking through what is the value that we're offering. And it's one of those things, when I listen to you talk about the way that you break down what can happen and the benefits of a decentralized identity, I'd be curious for the builders listening, or for anyone who may look at this clip, what can they be thinking about? Of course, talking to the community, getting out there, but like, can you give an example of the thought process to say, okay, do I need a token? Not need a token. Okay, if I need a token, How do I want to do that? Like, how would you suggest, as someone who's been around for a while, that builders ask
Sound like-
themselves these questions?
I really feel like I should have like a long gray beard sometimes when you've been around. I don't I don't necessarily think I have more wisdom than anyone else in this regard. So please take everything with a pinch of salt. Like there are super wise people who have been in the community for 6 months, or like people like yourselves have been around for a year. One of those wise people said recently that I think I heard it at a conference that, and this is probably something that is obvious to a lot of people. If you want your protocol, your system to work after you've turned off the lights and gone home, you probably need a token. If the token is there to make that happen, then that's a good reason to have a token. If it's just there to kind of be an alternative to equity, then it's probably not a good idea to have a token. You'll have a bad time. So really think of it in that way.
Does it keep the lights on kind of perspective?
Yeah. Think of it as actually, it's a good argument in general when you're building smart. Not when you're building everything on Web3. There's a lot of things you can build on Web3, but when you're building a smart contract protocol, build it so that you can disappear. Build it so that you can write yourself out of a job.
I mean, Satoshi did get the ball started, right? I guess he set the precedence.
Totally, yeah. He or she totally did. Just that if only there's a difficult balance to find, right? Because you have to be there, and you definitely shouldn't try to build purely for decentralization from the start. But if your roadmap doesn't have a clear direction towards decentralization, then you probably don't need a token. It might be fine not to want to be fully decentralized, but I at least put it this way: as a consumer, I'd look twice at a token model that wasn't there purely for decentralization purposes. Maybe I'm being a bit.
And that's one of the biggest things. It's like projects. I guess it almost became, if you're going to build on Web3, people really believe you have to have a token, and it's like, wait, you have a Web3 project, there's no token, and it's strange to me to see this perspective. But at the same point, though, that's what a bull market kind of teaches people.
You're missing out. You're missing out on the wins. I mean, it's aside from everything else, like it opens up a can of worms when it comes to incentive alignment, especially if you've also got
exactly
that you're selling, right? But it's, again, I think I used to be actually quite skeptical about tokens. I always just think, even people using utility tokens, would it be better off if they just used stablecoin or other utility token or other like native tokens? But I've come, and a lot of this is due to my kind of exploration of like the refi movement and regenerative economics in general. The idea of we mentioned it briefly earlier on, inculcating your values into your money and having your values represented by a token. Imagine if everybody had their own personal token. That'd be quite cool. So I think
I definitely want to do a community token. Just not for like a major value trying to pump it, but because I'm a part of communities, and those things are cool. Whenever like you're there from early on, and I figure if my favorite influencers, if they had their own system, their own token or something, and I had like the early stage versions of it, oh, that'd be so cool.
Yeah, it's an incentive. It's a incentive aligner. That's what it's there for.
That makes a lot of sense. I want to unpack what you said, though, because that's something that is super valuable. If you're thinking about tokens, light switch on, off. Will the lights turn off without it? And then also looking at it from the perspective of decentralization and seeing how are you getting to decentralization and making sure you break that down. So when you're looking at alignments, you can be sitting on the same side of the table as your community, making something that's going to actually stay around. And if it's not, permissionless and not able to stick around, it doesn't matter anyways. These things are important, and I'll wrap up here because when I look at builders in our community, I think that we have so much more inside of us. We're still figuring out how to share more of it. I see a few folks that are real loud, and I see so many countless projects that have great stories, great people, great solutions, and they're building. They're focusing on what needs to happen. And I've also seen some some frustrations in communities about like there's this gets delayed, this gets pushed back, this thing's gonna come out quite soon, and there's definitely reasons to be skeptical. And the whole idea behind this series was to be able to kind of move the veil back a bit, to not talk necessarily about what is the token price today, but instead to say, okay, the people who are building the stuff behind your favorite tokens, whatever those might be, who are those folks? Put a face to a name and see how they think. So I think we can wrap that up here, Daniel. It's been an absolute pleasure going over this. Before we finish up, my friend, I'd like to hear, what are you guys working on right now that you're excited about? And is there anything you'd like to share to highlight for people to watch out for coming up?
Yeah, highlight definitely, especially the Solana people. Keep an eye, build your profiles on Civic Me. Go and connect up and curate your Web3 identity. The things we're focusing on right now on Solana, things like social recovery and other forms of recovery and key rotation to really put meat on the bone of the promise of decentralized identifiers. But also, how cool would it be if you've created your Web3 identity on Solana, and then you go to an Ethereum or a Polygon dApp, and you connect your MetaMask, and the same Web3 profile shows up, and the same identity shows up on there. That's what we're working on next. It's not far away. It's a very close grasp. So keep an eye out on Civic Me for that.
Yeah, I've got the site pulled up here, and I just dropped a lower third for you.
Nice.
Well, then finally, there's something from just myself to you as a team member. How can we help you as a community? What's something you might be looking for, whether that's a type of talent, maybe you're looking for a certain type of solution, a relationship in a beautiful ecosystem? Who would be helpful for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not used to asking for things, so I don't have an out-of-the-box answer. Streamflow, I really like what you guys are doing, and I think actually I'd like to talk with you guys a little bit more about wallet abstractions. We can do that offline. If you've got a protocol in general and you're interested in the idea of Civic Pass for permissioning, if you've got a DAO and you're interested in non-plutocratic voting systems, by which I mean voting systems that are purely based on who's got the most money. If you're building a DAO that you want to have voting systems that are based on real people, then talk to us, because we want to work with you on that. We've got some integrations already, but we can build more. We are always looking for integrations, people who think that identity is the thing that they're missing in their platform. I think in general, as we move from kind of crypto to Web3, from financial transactions to social interactions, a lot more of these use cases, whether it be blogging or messaging and things like that, are coming in, and we want to be involved. Don't rebuild, don't build from scratch stuff that we've already been working on and thinking about. But also, we all don't think we've got all the, just because it sounded a little bit kind of uppity, I don't think we've got all the answers. So my final answer to that question is, identity is by definition, democratic and a democratic subject that needs the input from a plurality of voices, from different backgrounds, from different ethnic groups, from different genders, and from different age groups, in order to build something that really works for everyone. We don't think just we bunch of engineers living in kind of developed world countries have anywhere close to the range and the understanding to be able to solve the problem for everyone. So the one thing I would ask people would be to add us on Twitter at Civic Key. I'm Dan B. Kelleher, and send us your opinions on what you think the identity layer of the future would look like. Please feel free to criticize anything that I've said today and offer your own opinions. I really, really would love that. So yeah, thanks for that.
Amazing. Well, thanks for your attitude there. I love seeing the open mind. The next time, everybody.